Okay, in this lesson we're going to learn about some of the tools and features found within the 3ds Max rendered frame window. Alright, so as you start getting a little bit deeper into rendering and you start working more with some of your own scenes, you're going to find yourself looking at this rendered frame window quite a bit. So this is going to start to become a very, very familiar sight. So when it comes to actually rendering whatever we have within our viewport, there's actually several different ways of doing that. There's several different ways of pulling open that rendered current frame window. So one, which is the method that we looked at in our previous lesson, is to actually render from directly within the render setup. So we can just choose the render icon, or choose the render button, and there we go. Right, that'll open up this window and set off a new render. Now, if we already happen to have this window open, we do have the render button that's right at the bottom of this rendered frame window. So we can always just click on that again, and now that will start a new render. Right, now we can also access this rendered frame window through the toolbar. So if I were to close this out, if we go all the way down toward the end, we can render the current frame. So you can see rendered frame window. Now this will actually open up the window without starting up a new render. So if we just simply need to open this up in order to view this, maybe we've accidentally closed this and want to open it back up without having to completely re-render again, this is the best way to access that. Right, so several different ways of actually getting to this rendered frame window and actually setting off a new render. Now, here is one keyboard shortcut that you'll probably want to get familiar with and one that you'll definitely find useful. If you have your rendered frame window closed and now we want to render whatever is currently within our active viewport, you can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Shift-Q. So press Shift-Q on my keyboard. That will pull open the rendered frame window and set off a new render. Alright, so you'll find me actually using this keyboard shortcut quite a bit throughout the rest of this training. I find this to be probably the most useful way just because now I don't have to worry about having to go in and hunt down any kind of a menu icon or go up to a menu. Just use the keyboard shortcut and you're good to go. So within this rendered frame window, there's actually quite a few different features to be found. Right, so one method is that we don't necessarily have to completely re-render this whole frame. Maybe there's just one particular area that we want to kind of check out and start to kind of tune and re-render. So what we can do is choose this, or pull this menu down, and let's choose Region. Now as soon as we do that, you can see this little box that pops up. Now within this area, we can just simply come in, start to resize this, position our cursor anywhere within this region, start to move this down to the area that we want to tune. You'll also notice within your viewport that we can see this exact same little features, so we can start to move this around directly within the viewport if we want to. And now, with this region active, the next time we hit render, the render will only occur within this area that we've defined. Right, so lots and lots of time that can be saved by not necessarily having to re-render this entire frame if there's just one particular area that we need to work with. Right, and 3ds Max should remember this area even if we were to close out this render view. And let's say we were to come in and start working with something else. And as soon as we try to re-render this again, just pressing Shift-Q, you can see it still remembers this area. Right? And if any time we want to change this, we can just go back to the Edit region, grab this, start to move this around. Right? Find ourselves a new region, and continue working. Right, if we want to take this back to the point where we can start to render out our full frame, just simply set this back to view, re-render, and now you can see the entire frame is now going to update. Alright, very nice. Now we do have a few of these other features that can be found in here, such as the auto region selected, rendering subsets. So what we'll do is actually hold off on talking about these for now, and we'll talk about these a little bit later in our course. These will be a little bit easier to discuss once we have a chance to talk about things like materials and just how to work with those. Once we have a chance to talk about that, then it'll be a little bit easier to demonstrate some of these features. Okay, so moving on, we have the viewport control. So this is where we can actually set the viewport that's going to be rendered from. So if we wanted to render this from the top view, we could come in and render this. This feature can also be useful if, let's say we just happen to have the wrong viewport selected, and we were to render this, again, just pressing Shift-Q. So if this is not the viewport that you wanted to render from, as opposed to having to close this rendered window out, going back, highlighting the correct view, all we have to do is simply come back, choose the right viewport, and we're good to go. Right now, one of the really useful features that we have here is also the ability to lock the viewport. So this is really useful because a lot of times what you'll find is you're probably just going to render from one particular camera or one particular view. There's really no need to have to worry about rendering from one of these other three orthographic views. So once you have this viewport set, what we can do is actually lock that. So now, no matter which viewport is active, it will only render whatever we currently have in our perspective view. So if I go into the left view, Shift Q to re-render, and I can always be certain that whatever I get within this rendered frame window will always come from the perspective view. Now below this, we do have some additional features for being able to save our image as well as be able to clone this and clear out the image. So if we wanted to take whatever we currently have within this rendered frame window, save this out, just go to the Save Image icon. You can choose to save this really anywhere that we want, in any format that we want. So let's say we wanted to save this as a bitmap, and we can call this something like Orange Spheres. There you go, and choose where we want to save this. I'll just maybe put this in the root of my Introduction to 3ds Max project. Take this, save it out. We can choose whether or not we want to save this as an 8-bit or a 24-bit, and you can see the color depth that's available with each one of those. Alright, and there we go. So now if I take a look at the directory that I just saved this image out, you can see here's my saved image. Right, now in addition, we could actually take this and just simply copy this image. This will basically just copy this to the clipboard, and then we could just paste this somewhere else, maybe in something like Photoshop. We can also take this rendered frame window and clone this. So this can be really beneficial as far as now having some kind of a duplicate image. So now I can start to maybe just move this over to the side. Over in this window, we can start to make adjustments to things like materials, lighting, whatever we want. And now we always have some kind of a basis for comparison. So this is, again, really useful for comparing multiple renders and comparing the changes that we make from one render to the next. And we'll actually get in the habit of using this in some of our later lessons in this course. Right, and finally, we could come in and simply print this image directly to some kind of a printer. In my case, this is going to save this to a PDF file, so we could save the format or save the output out that way. And then finally, if we needed to clear this image out, just simply clear that, and now we've blanked out this render frame window. Right, and then in addition, if we need to, we can also access the render setup directly from this render frame window. So that's going to be this first icon right in here. See, if we press that button, that will call open the render setup. So that can be useful if, for whatever reason, you're not able to access this menu, or if you choose not to use the keyboard shortcut, which again is going to be F10. So that's a look at how we can start to take advantage of some of the features found within this rendered frame window. So like I said, as we start to progress a little bit further within this course, we're going to get in the habit of using some of these different features that we've just had a chance to look at.